Robin Hood Radio and the Robin Hood Radio Network is proud to present Leonard Lopate at Large, lively hour-long in-depth discussions providing overviews and context to topics usually covered in partial measures. His guests include leading thinkers, scientists, artists, economists, farmers, historians, authors, and politicians. Mr. Lopate is a Peabody Award winner whose numerous honors include 3 Associated Press Awards and 3 James Beard Awards.
Welcome to Leonard Lopate at Large. I'm Leonard Lopate. It's always a special pleasure for me to welcome today's guest to my show. Philip Lopate is that rare writer who has excelled at nearly every literary form. He's published award-winning works of poetry and fiction, essays on a wide range of topics, and literary and film criticism. And he joins us today to discuss films, this year's new releases that he finds most interesting. Philip, it is so good to have you back on Lopate at Large.
I'm happy to be here, and especially because I get to tell you stuff which is not always possible for the younger brother to lecture the older brother.
Although in recent years you've seen a lot more movies than I have.
Yes.
You've published and edited a couple of books about films, and there's been a feeling in recent years that movies aren't as good as they used to be, especially American movies. How do you think this year's crop stacks up?
Very well. In fact, I don't buy this whole idea of the death of cinema, and actually I think that recently there have been many, many good American movies. Some of it I think has to do with Netflix. And I realize that some people hate Netflix and think that they're driving movie theaters out of business, but
aren't they?
Well, what I'm seeing is that they're greenlighting a lot of films made for adults that are intelligent, artful, and independent. And so, just as a movie studio, they're really making it easier for creative films to be made. And then, as far as the fact that they usually open and close these films in a space of 1 to 2 weeks, all I'm going to say about that is that most of these films would not survive more than 2 weeks anyway, even if Netflix had nothing to do with them. So for the moment, I am very grateful to Netflix.
I still want to return to the idea that things got tired for a while.
Yes.
There was talk maybe 10 years ago or so that all the new energy was coming from Asia, from Africa, from South America, from places that hadn't produced as many films, but the American, well, first of all, Hollywood was pretty much dying.
Well, yeah, there was first the idea that the cutting edge was coming from Asia and Africa, and then, as you'll remember, the talk turned to all the good stuff is television now, and movies are not cutting it anymore. And I think there's still wonderful stuff being produced for television, but it's a different form. Sometimes some of the programs, the series that are made for television, begin to feel a little bloated. They're casual, but it's great to have that extra space and everything. But there's something to be said for the hour and a half or 2 hour film.
They follow certain formulae. Yeah. I've noticed that the police procedurals, generally you have a group of people that come back every week,
right.
And we spend about 3/4 of the show on their personal problems, and the case at hand is just kind of a tangential thing.
And often the personalities of the police are more interesting than the case, because in a funny way, when you do a police procedure about a serial killer, there's nothing that can take us into the real mentality of a serial killer. It's completely inexplicable. So in a way, when you finally discover who the serial killer is, there's something kind of disappointing about it.
So looking at these films, pretty much all of the American ones were not done in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And 6 of the films on the list that you have provided me with are made by women.
This has been a wonderful year for women directors. And, I like you, probably have read many articles over the years deploring the fact that there aren't enough women directors. Women are not being given the opportunity to direct films. So what happened? Maybe all of that pressure finally produced results. But if you look at some of these films, for instance, just to give you an example, there's Can You Ever Forgive Me by Marielle Heller. There's The Kindergarten Teacher by Sarah Colangelo. There's the Land of Steady Habits by Nicole Holosena. And I want to say that Nicole Holosena, just by herself, has been such a breath of fresh air. She's done such interesting movies over the years. And she also co-wrote the screenplay for Can You Ever Forgive Me? So she's a perfect example of the kind of filmmaker who's creating a cinema of character.
And where are they coming from? They're not coming from TV, are they?
No. And then there's Tamara Jenkins, who did a wonderful film, Private Life. And she, too, has been making movies over the years and basically spending years and years just to get the funding for these films. But that was excellent, really excellent, Private Life. So,
and a couple of the films are made or foreign films.
Foreign films.
The films that you list here. One is made by Chloe Zhao, and the other is an Italian film that Alice Rohrwacher, a German director, I guess.
Yes. No, an Italian director. Actually, she's Italian, and she's made a bunch of really good films, and she's become a kind of star of the international film circuit. Chloe Zhao, I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name. She made
Zhao.
That's an American film.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a foreign film, and it's a really interesting film. It's called The Rider, and it deals with rodeo riders, and it's poised exactly in between, let's say, a feature film and a documentary, because she's working with all these people who actually are in that rodeo circuit. So I do think that without going too far into the male gaze and the female gaze, I do think that often women directors bring a psychological complexity to relationships that does feel a little more nuanced, let's say. I mean, the typical Hollywood film, for instance, every character is granted one character trait. The star is granted 1.5 character traits to show ambivalence and contradiction, and the minor characters all have one character trait. And that's not the case with some of these independent films. I mean, I thought a film like Private Life, for instance, with Paul Giamatti and Catherine Hahn, two wonderful actors. They're both middle-aged. They're both grown-ups. So many of the movies that were directed in the past for teenage boys, whether they were action comic book kind of movies or whether they were rom-coms, featured a young man who basically was a doofus, clumsy, still regressive, still acting like a 12-year-old, obsessed with video games or whatever. These films, these films have a kind of an adult complexity. If I name another film, for instance, Wildlife, that was directed by the actor Paul Dano. Again, it's involved with characters who have been around the block a few times, whose lives are starting to fall apart. And that particular film has an incredible performance by Carey Mulligan.
A director, well, he's still acting, Paul Dano.
He's still acting. In fact, he was in the recent Escape from Dannemora, yeah.
By the way, we can now take telephone calls on this show, and I'm inviting our listeners, if they want to join the conversation, if they've seen any of these films, or if they have another film that they're particularly madly in love with, you're invited to give us a call at 212-209-2877. That's 212-207-2877. 7877. Still, most of the movies that I see advertised on television have car crashes, have monsters, have superheroes. So
well, there's still, of course, well, there's
209.
what did I said it wrong?
207.
Oh, okay. I gave out the phone number wrong. 212-209-2877. That's 212-209-2877.
I mean, I think there is still some.
Somebody's going to be getting calls right now and saying, what the heck is that all about?
I think there is still some good, very interesting genre movies being made. For instance, a movie like Widows,
Which is on your list.
Which is on my list with Viola Davis and Colin Farrell and Liam Neeson.
It's directed by Steve McQueen.
Steve McQueen. Now, Steve McQueen is somebody who, not to be confused with the actor Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen is somebody who basically was a painter who got into making art films. So this first film was called Hunger, and the second one was 12 Years a Slave. And so this is his first genre movie, if you will, and it's basically a heist movie and a crime movie and political corruption. And one thing is that he has really grown as a technician of film, and this film and Widows moves really well, and it looks beautiful. The cinematography is really great, and the compositions are really great. Unfortunately, about halfway through the film, it becomes rather mechanical and turns into a kind of predictable heist film. But it's still beautiful to look at, So something like that, there's still room for a lot of artistry. And then you take a movie like Hereditary, which is essentially a horror movie, but which ends up being a lot about family life. And it, too, has an incredible performance by Toni Collette.
Now, that's directed by Ari Aster.
Yeah.
I don't know about this director.
Well, there's still horror films are still the entry for a lot of independent and experimental filmmakers. It's a kind of a safe way to make a film fairly cheaply, that is guaranteed some kind of audience.
I noticed that there are two controversial political films out this year, and they didn't make your list.
Well, there's a Michael Moore film.
Well, there's Vice.
Yeah, Vice, which I haven't seen yet, which I'm dying to see, but it hasn't opened up yet. Yeah.
And then there's that other film, and I'm forgetting the name, about Gary Hart.
Yeah, I don't think that's opened up either.
Hasn't it?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it has.
Uh-huh.
So give me a break, Lenny.
I'm curious about why we're suddenly seeing these films at this time. Both of them, I would imagine, have liberal bents.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really looking forward to Vice because it's by the same director and the same writer who made the American Hustle or whatever that film is called. Anyway, there's so many interesting films being made, and that's just the American films, and then there are plenty of extraordinary foreign films being made.
The big one, the one that's getting all the attention right now, is Roma.
Yeah.
Now, Roma is interesting because it's available on Netflix, but also in theaters.
And you really owe it to yourself to see it in the theater because the cinematography, which is actually done by the director himself,
Alfonso Cuarón,
who made Gravity and Y Tu Mama Tambien and Children of Men. This is his so-called autobiographical film. He did the cinematography, and it has an extraordinary kind of range of blacks and grays.
It's in black and white, and yet it feels more realistic than if it were in color.
Yeah, no, it's such a pleasure to see this kind of black and white cinematography, and in a way, it's kind of like a bow to some of the classic neo-realist movies, like Paisan and Open City, and also to the Satyajit Ray movies like Pather Panchali and World of Apu. So he's working in that kind of humanist genre, if you will. But it still has an epic quality, and I think it's because it's CinemaScope and it's gorgeous black and white.
And it's called Roma not because it takes place in Rome or is about gypsies, but because it's set in an area of Mexico City, the Roma Condesa area,
Right.
that is home to the upper middle class. And this is really a film about class, even though class is not stressed. There's only one moment when somebody even mentions it, but it's there throughout the whole film.
Absolutely, and part of the paradox is that he's making a neorealistic film set in upper middle class settings. So it's not like those classics, that which are basically about poverty. The main
All the Italian, the Rossellini films.
Yeah, exactly. The main character, Cleo, is a maid employed by this upper middle class family.
And it's played by a woman. And now I haven't seen all the films that you on your list, but I have seen this one. Played by a woman named Yoritzia Aparicio, and it's in one of the most amazing performances you could ever see in film. And you wonder, what has she been doing to get to this point of being such a great actress? Because she hasn't appeared in any other films.
No, well, and this too is part of the old Rossellini tradition of using non-professionals. But what she is doing is moving through space, and in a way, one of the things that I like the best about Roma is to put it pretentiously, it's mise en scène, the way it moves people through space. And so there's this big house, and the maid is responsible for keeping it in order. So a lot of the film is taken up with her moving through these space. She's the one who connects spatially the whole movie. She, just through her body and through the way she moves. And of course there are a few scenes which are set in a much more impoverished background. The film opens up, but I think that what impressed me the most was the authoritative way it was filmed. And I got to say, in addition, that
the other performances are wonderful. The woman who plays the wife,
the mother, the wife. The wife is the one professional actress in the whole film, and we need a professional actress in that role because the wife is contradictory, and you need somebody who can handle all those contradictions.
On the one hand, she can be a pain. On the other hand, she's very warm and giving.
Yeah, she goes from being really critical and bossy to suddenly being warm, and so you really need somebody who's got some chops, some acting chops to do that. But I just have to say something about Roma to complicate things, which is that I love the film. And
we're getting a call.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, but what were you going to say? I thought the film went on too long, to be honest. About 15 minutes too long.
I was loving it so much that I didn't feel that, but I did encounter in my peer group, and film critics are very often influenced by their peers, even though they're supposed to be autonomous emperors of their opinion. It doesn't work out that way, and some people felt that it was a little calculated. It's a little too knowing in a way, To me, I was just so delighted that somebody was on top of his craft to that degree. But I can understand that it may feel a little self-pleased, you might say.
I have been inviting our listeners to join in the conversation. Our number is 212-209-2877. And let's put a call on the air. Hi, WBAI. Speak to Philip Lopate. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
My name is Joe. I just got finished watching Roma.
Yeah?
One of the interesting things about the maid, she's a Maztec Indian.
Yes.
So there was a whole sort of different cultural thing.
Yes.
That was going on through the movie.
This whole India thing,
her
absolutely.
Deadpan, lack of facial expression.
Her stoicism, yeah.
Yes, and it was very Fellini-esque, I thought.
What made you say that? Why Fellini?
Well, just because of the real of the subject. It was about I guess I'm going through Amicor. It's just that it was always this whole thing of very different things happening to people, like when they went to the beach and she saved the kids, and then there was this scene where her lover ran out on her, and he's into some kind of military organization.
Yes,
martial arts, actually.
Right, and the guy isn't that like an Indian pose where he puts his leg up and puts his hands over his head?
I don't know, but I can see the connection with Amicord because they're both memory films, and that leads to a certain episodic structure. It's like somebody remembering what their childhood was like. In this case, remembering.
I can barely hear you.
Remembering the maid that took over.
Right.
So they're both memory films in a way. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
And all the kids and everything that was going on. I'd like to talk about one other movie.
Go ahead.
The Party's Not Over Yet. And I think it's from England.
Yeah.
And the woman who did it directed it and acted in it.
That's great when that happens.
Don't know who that is.
Yeah.
Can you give us a little more information?
If you want to give a minute here?
Sure. Meanwhile, okay. Well, hang on. Meanwhile, a reminder, our number is 212-209-2877. We don't have too many films here where the directors are also acting in them. I think Redford made a movie this year. Go ahead.
She's got to be like 20, 25 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a rowdy movie of a sort of a lost soul, and the cinematography is great because it's just and the music. I think a lot of time the music in films are not really talked about that much.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about a movie that has music, which is A Star Is Born.
I saw that. I felt it was too predictable for me.
Yeah, I was not a fan of A Star Is Born.
I mean, I thought.
But you didn't like the original Frederick March, Judy Garland?
Oh yeah,
film?
yeah.
I love the Judy Garland, James Mason film, and I think it's interesting if you just compare the two because James Mason was always an actor who conveyed intelligence and danger. You never knew when he was going to, go off the deep end or something. And also when an actor is intelligent, he could say anything at any time, including anything cruel. Whereas Bradley Cooper, who plays interesting characters with other directors, here he constructed a film for himself where he was basically a dull, dumb cowboy, a country and western star, and so the other thing is that the film has a lot of montages, and so you don't have that deep focus way that George Cukor directed, and you don't have wonderful actors like Jack Carson and Charles MacArthur.
But you do have. This is really a vehicle for Lady Gaga, isn't it?
It's a vehicle for Lady Gaga, and I think she's fine. I really think that the problem is with the Bradley Cooper character, and also Bradley Cooper again he's an actor who's directing, and there's an example of somebody who's, but for some reason he's far more interesting in American Hustler, or American Sniper, or any of these other movies than he is here. And the music, I think, is not great, but I'm not maybe a connoisseur of that kind of music.
Thank you so much for your call. And we have another caller. Our number, by the way, my guest is Philip Lopate, and we're talking about some of the better films of the last year. Philip has published a number of books about films, anthologies, and also film criticism. And are you working on another one?
I'm working on a big anthology of the American essay, but I always write film criticisms. So, for instance, I have a piece coming out on Shoplifters, which I think is one of the best movies of the year by the Japanese director Koreeda.
Okay. You're on the air, WBAI, you're on the air. Hello.
Yeah, I'm another Joe from New Jersey, and I go to movies a lot.
Me
And
too.
the best movie I saw so far this year is The Green Book.
Oh, I want to see that movie. Tell me about it.
That
I almost
that
went
is
last
a
night.
Very good. It's a very good movie. It's a true story about a black musician
Yeah.
from that lived in Carnegie Hall, and I think that it was. I think a lot. I'm black myself. So I think a lot of black people should go see it, and also white people, because it shows a relationship between a black man and a white man in 1960, and where they make this journey down south so he can perform for rich people. And I thought it was very, very good. I mean,
You sold
I
me.
came out there feeling,
I'm going to see
I
it this
came out
weekend.
feeling real good.
Yeah.
You got to. I think everybody should go see it. You know,
Okay.
it's a very good movie, and I think, my opinion, I think both guys they up for to get a best actor and best supporting actor. Both actors are very good, so either one could get that that award.
What kind of music do they play?
It's the musician is like a symphonic pianist.
It's a classical music.
And classical music,
Yeah.
and that's the black guy, and how he story about how he was raised and everything, and he decided to do some tours down south, and all white upper class, and naturally in the '60s they deal with the racism and the prejudice,
Mm-hmm.
and him and the white guy first, they're like opposites, but they come together in such a way that I think it shows that in that era, in this era now, where blacks and whites can very much get along. And I think as far as young black people out there now, young black kids, they can learn something from this person who shows a lot of discipline and determination to achieve something, at some cost. And the white guy shows him how to live another life. But it's an excellent movie. It's got to be the best movies out there now.
Yeah, I think
Like I say,
Well, thank you. And it also reminds me of some interviews I've done over the years. For example, one with Red Rodney, who played with Charlie Parker. And when they toured the South, because he was white, a white trumpet player in a black jazz group, they called him Albino Red. That was a way of getting around it. But there have been many stories about mixed groups going south, and half the group stayed at a nice hotel, and the other half stayed in people's homes because of Jim Crow laws. Often the star was the one who wound up having to stay, be taken in by somebody, some local who.
that happened with a lot of black musicians, that they went over to the black side of town and slept in somebody's extra bedroom. Yeah. Okay.
So, talking about towns, I interviewed Frederick Wiseman about his film Monrovia, Indiana, and that's one of the movies on your list.
I love this movie, Monrovia, Indiana, and I think it's an incredible portrait of a small town. We're now reading all these stories about how a lot of these towns are not doing very well. They don't have an economy to support them anymore, and so naturally, when people try to explain how Donald Trump got elected, they look at some of these small towns. Weissman didn't actually address that politically. It's just something in the background, kind of. But he brings a kind of sympathy to these people's lives, and a kind of detachment at the same time. So it's not a satire, but it's a very elegiac movie in a way, and he's worked out visually and orally this way of bringing gravitas to ordinary daily life, So in a way, Weissman, who is in his 90s now, is obviously confronting his own death, One of the subtexts of the movies is this sort of sense of mortality. You know?
And you mentioned the fact that he doesn't really go into politics, and I talked to him about that.
Yes.
Because this is really Trump country.
Right.
And yet you gain insight into all of that aspect of the politics of America without anybody actually bringing it up as a topic.
Yeah, there's a scene in a gun shop, and you know, liberals tend to demonize gun shops, but in this gun shop, the gun shop owner is saying, so, you know, how's your health and how you doing, and showing a lot of concern for his customers, and you realize these are people who all are looking after each other. So I think I think in every respect, it's interesting that that Weissman made Monrovia, Indiana, after his last film, which was about Jackson Heights. Maybe Ex Libris was in between, but anyway, he made this other film, Jackson Heights, which is a kind of celebration of a diverse neighborhood that's full of contesting ethnic groups, and everybody's got a lot to say. And then he makes this movie about basically Midwestern town where nobody is that talkative, you know,
and pretty much everyone is white,
and everybody is white except for 2 or 3 characters in the background. And so, you know, the images take over.
We are back with Philip Lopate. We're talking about this year's films. Obviously, you haven't seen all of them. I sure haven't seen most of them. I am hindered right now because I've just had an operation on my leg, so I'm not going out as much as I would have, because a number of these films really intrigued me, Phil.
Well, you know, there are some others that are on Netflix, like The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, which is a Coen Brothers film. And that's a film that
got mixed reviews.
I wasn't expecting to like it, and I really did like it. And this is a case of the Coen Brothers being such independent souls, you know, who do what they're going to do no matter what, you know. And they're very mordant, they're very sardonic, and it's a kind of anthology film composed of about 5 different short pieces, but it works somehow, and it's a true Western, you know. So that's an example of a film that was made by old pros, you know. And then another film that really interested me was Julian Schnabel's At Heaven's Gate, which is a film all about Vincent van Gogh. And it's probably the 4th or 5th film made about Vincent van Gogh, but it's gorgeous to look at. It's a beautiful visual design, and you know, Schnabel, I don't know what you think about his paintings, but he's a pretty good filmmaker.
It is confusing because there is another movie called At Heaven's Gate by Michael Cimino from 1980.
No, that was called Heaven's Gate.
Heaven's Gate. The ad is important.
Yeah,
there.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that was once called the worst film ever made, although now it has developed a certain cult following.
Yeah, it's not a bad film. It's just a disappointment. But this At Heaven's Gate has a great performance by Willem Dafoe as Van Gogh. In a way, it didn't interest me as much as Maurice Pialat's film Van Gogh, because Pialat made Van Gogh into a kind of obnoxious character, which was interesting, whereas in At Heaven's Gate, Van Gogh is kind of like a saint, you know.
We're going to start taking some more calls in just a moment. Our number here, 212-209-2877. But quickly, let's go through some of the other things that we've seen promoted heavily. Mm-hmm. For example, the film about Lee Israel, based on Lee Israel's 2008 memoir,
that's
Can You Ever Forgive Me? Marielle Heller. I don't know that director, but I sure know the stars of that film.
Yeah, Melissa McCarthy and Richard E. Grant. Can You Ever Forgive Me is really one of the 2 or 3 favorite movies of the year. I just love this film, and it's set in the 1980s in New York during a period when, you know, a lot of people were making a lot of money, and then there were those people who were going under, and this is about 2 losers, if you will, 2 people who were going under. And in many ways, they're both dislikable characters, which I always think is a risk. but Melissa McCarthy actually plays this person who forges letters of the great and the famous. She's a writer who's not getting her books published anymore, and
she once had been successful and actually had published legitimate books.
Yes.
I remember interviewing Lee Israel many years ago.
Was she obnoxious?
I can't remember. I thought she probably wasn't my favorite guest ever.
Well, in this case, she gets involved with a guy who Richard E. Grant, who is basically a con man and a hustler. And one of the interesting things about this film is that both characters are gay, but nothing is made of that. It's just okay, so they're gay, and they're not celebrated because they're gay, or they're not denigrated because they're gay.
Well, the Melissa McCarthy is famous for doing comedy, so
Yes.
This is a departure for her.
Yes, if I could get people to see this film on the basis of telling you that it's a very drab film, but in the best possible sense drab. That is, the visual design of it is like all towards the orange and brown, and Melissa McCarthy is restrained, is very restrained in this performance. And I do think it's one of the great performances. I would put it up there with Carey Mulligan in Wildlife, as one of the best performances of the year. And Richard E. Grant is astonishing, and he's getting attention for it. But the thing about it is it's very well written, and it's really about these two people who are trying to, who survive by skullduggery, and you got to root for them, even though they're doing something pretty corrupt. But the whole system is so corrupt at this point.
Another great performance in a film that I particularly didn't love is Maggie Gyllenhaal's performance in The Kindergarten Teacher. It's a remake of an Israeli film from 2015 of the same name. I just didn't buy the story. I could not believe that character would do what she did. I don't want to give it away, but
it's about a teacher who is trying to inspire her kids to write, and there's a kid who's a terrific poet,
a 5-year-old. She compares him to Mozart.
Yeah, and we don't know if he's a terrific poet. This movie meant a lot to me because for years I taught kids creative writing, and I know what happens when you start to go over the moon because some kid seems like a diamond in the rough or something. The funny thing is that often kids will just spit out these poems without knowing what they are, and to them it's like they're just blabbering. But meanwhile, the adult is thinking, "Oh my God, this is so great!" A friend of mine who didn't like the movie, as you didn't, said he has such a crush on Maggie Gyllenhaal that he couldn't believe that she could be a kindergarten teacher.
Oh, that wasn't my problem. My problem was what she did, the key act that she does. That's
she's
turning point of the film.
crazy. But you don't think there are occasionally attractive women who are crazy?
No, of course I do.
Be careful, Lenny. Yeah.
You talk about that. Crazy Rich Asians got a lot of attention.
Yes.
But also created some controversy.
I couldn't take it seriously. It seems so synthetic in a way, fun to watch. You about a half an hour after you leave the theater, you've forgotten what it's about. It's basically an opportunity to see Singaporean lights and to see a very attractive Asian men and women. Does it have a plot? I'm not sure.
And there are a number of Asian films on your list: Burning, The Hotel by the River.
And Shoplifters, yes.
Yes, and Shoplifters. Okay, let's talk a bit about Shoplifters before we go to another call, because you said that was pretty much your favorite.
One of my favorite films of the year. And this director, Koreeda, has made a number of really interesting films. He's been around for a while. Made Afterlife, made Nobody Knows. His films tend to be 20 minutes to a half an hour too long. And Shoplifters is very tight. It's the first time that he's really kept it to the right length. And it's about a family that's down on their luck who become shoplifters, And so there's this...
So they're sympathetic even though they're doing something criminal.
They're sympathetic even though they're doing criminal. And the director in an interview said, well, is it really so much more terrible to be a shoplifter than all these people who are, corporations that are ripping us off, So, but on the other hand, what's interesting is that
When I'm caught stealing, I'll say that.
yeah, right. The other thing is that the man who takes on all these kids, are basically adopted, some casually and unofficially, and the boy betrays the father betrays the son. So there's a kind of a bittersweet quality to it. And it's not all everybody loving everybody else. You do what you have to do, and I think the film shows that.
Philip Lopate is my guest today. We're talking about movies, this year's movies, and let's take a call. Hi, you're on WBAI.
Hi there. Thank you for taking my call. And I guess I'd like to speak on a film that was advertised over BAI. In fact, you're still advertising it. It's a documentary that I viewed, and it's the title of the documentary is "I'm Not Your Negro."
Sure.
And it was a documentary that was made by Raoul Peck.
Mm-hmm.
And it's based on notes of James Baldwin, the book that he did not write.
Right. Yes.
And I want to say that
But that's not a new film. I think
but we can still talk about it.
Interestingly, I think I interviewed Raoul Peck about that film 4 or 5 years ago.
No, but it's in the last year. Continue, please.
Go ahead.
Okay, and I just would like to encourage all the listeners, subscribe, take out make a pledge to BAI and get that film, I Am Not Your Negro, because it's not a recent film, but it is so profound
Yes.
and so well made, and Samuel Jackson, he did the narration on during the film, and I mean, once you view it, you'll find that you'll have to view it again and again,
Whoa.
and above all, view it in a group setting where you can sit down and speak, because although Mr. Baldwin is not with us, what he spoke of and what he objected to is quite current.
There's also the fact that in that film, you see Baldwin, who is incredibly charismatic. That is, the scenes with Baldwin, he carries himself with such a presence that you can't take your eyes off of him.
And since we are offering that as a premium, if you become a member of WBAI, give us a call at 516-620-3602 and become a sustaining member and say, I would love to have a copy of that film. Let's take another call.
Okay.
Hi, you're on the air.
Hi. Okay, I wanted to call before to talk about shoplifters. And as I was on the line, it was turned down, so I didn't get to hear you speak about it. But the gentleman who called about the film, I don't remember the name of the black musician going through the South.
The Green
with
Book.
The white show, the Green Book. Well, I think he and we should all be aware before we rush out to see it to have a critical eye, because I read a review by one of the family members today, and that 90% of it is false. That he didn't need to be introduced to black life, black culture, and that he was actually close to his family and to many musicians, and it just gave a very distorted view. So I think people should read some reviews, even though both those actors are tremendous.
And how about Shoplifters? What were you going to say about that?
Oh, I loved it. I really was online to see Roma, but tickets were sold out, so we went to
You lucked out,
Shoplifters.
yes.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
see Roma as well, but
Yeah.
Shoplifters, he's one
wonderful
of the
one.
great directors of the world right now.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah,
Yes.
it was very interesting.
Thank you so
We're still
much.
thinking about it. Okay.
We're running out of time, and there's a whole bunch of movies. The Favorite
Yeah,
was
I-
one of the movies that was promoted a lot on television. Then there's Devlatov,
I wanted to say something about
Support the Girls.
about a bad film by a great filmmaker. Orson Welles, The Other Side of the Wind. Cineasts have been waiting for this film for 30 or 40 years, and I finally saw it, and I know why Orson Welles didn't finish it, because he didn't really know what it was about, and it's a total mess.
So it's just been sitting in a can all these years?
About 100 hours have been sitting in the can, and Frank Marshall and Peter Bogdanovich did the thankless job of editing it. But the problem is not, you can't blame it on them. The problem is that it's essentially a very sour, vulgar movie, and doesn't really know what it wants to say.
Well, we're almost out of time. Are there any films that we haven't discussed that you particularly loved?
Well, I really love this film that's going to open up by Hong Sang-soo called The Hotel by the River. And I think he is one of the best filmmakers alive today. And he makes a lot of movies. He makes sometimes 3 in 1 year, and he sort of tosses them off, but they have a lot of reality and a lot of profundity. As for The Favorite, I think it's kind of like a one-joke stunt, It should be seen, but I think it's kind of thin.
Another film is Support the Girls by Andrew Bujalski, who was famous as one of the founders of the Mumblecore style.
I like
Is this Mumblecore?
I like it. It's a film about women who work in a kind of a bar where they all have to wear skimpy outfits, and it's got a great black and white cast, and it's an example of a very small movie that works.
I'm informed that the Raoul Peck film, James Baldwin, actually is available for a membership of $75 and not the full $120. So that's a reason. And you can get a CD of it by giving us a call at 516-620-3602. Some of these other films are rather quirky. For example, there's I mentioned Devlatov,
yes,
which is a film.
A Russian film.
Yes, and we don't see too many Russian films these days.
It's going to open up shortly. I was really impressed with it. It's by
a German. His name is Alexei German.
No, he's a Russian.
I know, but
Alexei German. His father was a great director, German, the guy who made Kustafi of My Car. And this is a film that it's about a Russian writer who is really down in the dumps.
We have time to sneak in one more call. Hi, WBAI, you're on the air. Hello.
Oh, that was me.
That's you. Go ahead.
Oh wow.
Well,
It was.
she got so excited.
Just so excited to speak. Well,
you said that Hang Sang-soo, The
Yeah.
Hotel by the River, he's one of the great filmmakers.
Right.
What is that film about?
It's about some people who are in a hotel, and they and an older man who's kind of running away from his responsibilities, and some younger people, and the family's trying to steer him the way people try to steer their older relatives.
A director I've interviewed a number of times, Olivier Assayas, is on your list with a film called Nonfiction.
Again, nonfiction is going to open up. I really recommend it. And it's a film about the Paris publishing scene. And anybody who has written a book or who hopes to write a book will see it and weep. It's a very, very funny story about basically the humiliation of being a writer.
Did you take it personally,
I
Philip?
took it very personally, and I really loved it.
Now, in what way of being humiliated?
Well, there's a scene in which the writer meets with his publisher, and assuming he's going to talk about the publisher publishing his book, and at the end the publisher says, "No, we're not publishing it. I thought you understood." you get a lunch out of it. So
Now, you mentioned Nicole Holofcener.
yeah.
She has 2 films here, one that she wrote and directed,
Yeah.
And the other one that she provided, co-scripted.
Yes.
The Land of Steady Habits is based on a novel that feels very, it's a novel by Ted Thompson, but it's kind of like a Connecticut suburban story.
It feels like John Cheever in a way, because it's really about somebody who opts out of the commuter life of Westport, Connecticut, or where I think that's where it's filmed. And once again, it has a wonderful performance by Ben Mendelsohn, and usually Nicole Holofcener has made movies about women, but this time a man is at the center. Some of her films include Please Give and Friends with Money and Enough Said, and this one has a great performance also by Edie Falco.
Now, where are we going to see these films other than if they wind up on Netflix or one of the other, Amazon or one of those other channels? Are there theaters that are showing them, giving them decent runs?
Yeah, I mean, theaters like the IFC and
There's Alamo in Brooklyn.
Alamo Film Society of Lincoln Center at the Eleanor Bunin, Monroe, Metrograph. Part of the sort of doomsaying is that movies theaters are closing, and we did lose a few wonderful theaters like the Sunshine and the Lincoln Art, but then we gained the Quad and the Metrograph. So the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away.
And I'm so glad that the Lord giveth us you today, Philip. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Great, I had fun.
And that brings us to the end of our show. My great thanks to Philip Lopate, to Reggie Johnson, who was at the audio controls, to Charlie Morrow, who composed our theme music, and to my producer, Jesse Lent, who helps make things run smoothly. Leonard Lopate at Large comes to you on Saturdays at 4 and Tuesdays at noon. You can subscribe to Leonard Lopate at Large podcast on iTunes and by clicking on Robin Hood Radio's archive program site, which is robinhoodradio.com. You can also check out Leonard Lopate at Large Facebook page. We hope to see you next week.